are on the record on 23 CF 170, People versus Timothy Bliefnick. Mr. Bliefnick is present in court along with his attorney, Ms. Casey Schnock. People are present by Assistant State's Attorney Josh Jones and Laura Keck. And Mr. Jones, are the people ready to present evidence today?
We are, Your Honor. We have 5 witnesses for today, and then once those 5 witnesses, I think 5. Ms. Keck said 6. I'm going to double check because normally she's right and I'm wrong.
Okay. All right.
It's 6.
Okay. And defendant ready to proceed today, Ms. Schnock?
Yes, Your Honor.
And anything we need to discuss before we bring in the jury?
Judge, the only thing I have, there is a new exhibit with regard to one of our witnesses based on how that evidence was, we anticipated it coming in, and then that changed, and now it's going to be People's Exhibit 243, which is text messages between, Facebook messages between Becky Bliefnick and Christine Mandel.
Okay.
And I've shown those, we've shown those to Ms. Schnock and updated her exhibit list as well.
All right. And we will take care of that when that comes up, because that's another one where Ms. Schnock made a pretrial objection to, correct? All right. Anything else we need to discuss by the way of the defendants?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Then we will be in recess, and we will start promptly at 9 o'clock, and I'll admonish about cell phones again. All right. We'll be in recess.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We are on the record on 23 CF 170, People versus Timothy Bliefnick. Mr. Bliefnick is present in court along with his attorney, Ms. Casey Schnock. People are present by Assistant State's Attorney Josh Jones and Laura Keck. And then, ladies and gentlemen, you are allowed to have your cell phones in the courthouse. However, if you are in the courtroom, you must have those cell phones turned completely off and stored away so that they are out of sight. If your cell phone would go off while you are in the courtroom, or if security would see you with your phone out, then you will be asked to leave and you will not be readmitted until the next day. That does not apply to media, who is allowed to have their electronic devices out so they can communicate with the public. But the media needs to wear their badges so that security can identify them as media and will not hassle you if you have your badge on. And then, Mr. Jones, anything before we bring the jury in?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
All right, let's bring in the jury.
This session of court is now reconvened. You can be seated.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I hope you all had a long, relaxing weekend, but we are continuing with the prosecution's case in chief. And Mr. Jones or Ms. Keck, do you have evidence for us today?
We do, Your Honor. The people would call Christine Mandel.
Ma'am, if you would step to the front of the courtroom, please. And then raise your right hand and be sworn by the clerk.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in a cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
Okay, then if you'll come around here, please, and have a seat right here in this chair. And then kind of scoot up to the table to where you're comfortable, ma'am, and then bend that microphone up so it's in front of you and speak towards the microphone, please, okay? All right, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you tell us your name, please?
Christine Mandel,
Ms. Mandel, can you spell your last name for us?
Mandel,
Ms. Mandel, where do you currently live?
Laguna Hills, California.
Did you, before living in California, did you used to live here in Quincy?
I did.
While you lived here in Quincy, did you know somebody by the name of Becky Bliefnick?
Yes.
Can you tell us how you knew Becky?
I worked for her and with her at Q-Town CrossFit. It's now Q-Town Fitness in 2013, and we started a CrossFit Kids program together.
How long did you work with her?
A little under 2 years, I believe.
Did you also know Tim Bliefnick?
Yes.
And Tim was Becky's husband, is that right?
Yes.
After you moved away from Quincy, did you and Becky still continue to stay in contact?
Yes.
Was one of the ways that you stayed in contact through Facebook?
Yes.
And specifically, would you talk over Facebook Messenger?
Yes.
When you would talk with Becky, were there things on her Facebook and when you talked to her that led you to believe it was Becky you were talking to?
Yes, of course.
Tell me things that you would see on her Facebook that you knew it was Becky.
She always posted pictures of her kids, her 3 boys, Deacon, Grayson, and Arlen, and she was a nurse, and she just was very prideful of being a mom.
Would she send you pictures of herself over Messenger showing how she was working out, how proud she was of herself?
Yes, she sent me a few messages because we had worked out together, and she had lost some weight and was really proud, and she knew I would be excited for her.
Did you guys have a conversation last March, specifically March 14th of 2022?
Yes.
And did that conversation occur over Facebook Messenger?
Yes.
Christine, I'm going to show you, we've marked these as People's Exhibit 243. Can you look at those and tell us what that is, please?
This was a conversation we had on Facebook.
And specifically, was that on that March 14th of 2022 date?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd ask that People's Exhibit 243 be admitted and published for the jury, please.
Ms. Stock, objection?
I would renew my previous objection for the record, Your Honor, and have no additional objections
All right.
for the record.
That objection was heard pre-trial. The court overruled the objection at that time. The court reconsiders its ruling and would overrule the objection at this time. And People's Exhibit 243 will be admitted and then may be published to the jury.
Ms. Mandel, up here at the top of the screen, this is where we can see that the conversation started March 14th, 2022 at 9:55 in the evening. Is that right?
Correct.
And during the course of that conversation, you asked Becky, these are your words in purple here, Becky, are you safe? Is that right?
Yes.
And the other messages we're going to see in black with the white background, those were messages Becky sent back to you.
Yes.
After you asked Becky, are you safe? Becky said to you, I told you your jaw would drop. Is that right?
Yes.
And then she continued, I feel safe right now. I'm super nervous for when this ends. If he doesn't get his mind, I feel he may literally lose his mind. Is that what she said to you?
He said if he doesn't get his way, I feel he may literally lose his mind. Yes.
Did she then continue and say later in the message, I also got a security system?
Yes.
After telling you that, did she say, he wants everything, wants sole custody of the kids, wants all the money, all the assets, wants me to suffer?
Yes.
Did your conversation continue that same late night of March 14th?
Yes.
As it continued, did she say, but I've had some serious PTSD with all this and the things I found out. Plus, I've had not one, but two coworkers get murdered by their exes in the last year, which has totally made me a nervous Nellie.
Yes.
Did she also continue, I'd rather let people believe what he tells him and stay alive for my kids. It sounds so crazy to say that out loud, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that he would go off the deep end.
Yes.
Did she also continue, he literally cares more about hurting me than anything else?
Yes.
Finally, did Becky Bliefnick tell you that night, I literally would never trust him to ever let him in my house if it was just us?
Yes.
Ms. Mandel, the person that you knew as Tim Bliefnick, do you see him here in court today?
Yes.
Can you tell us where he's sitting and what he's wearing, please?
He's sitting across from me in black.
Your Honor, if the record could reflect Ms. Mandel has identified the defendant.
The record will reflect that the witness has identified the defendant.
Thank you, ma'am. No other questions.
Questions, Ms. Schnock?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Good morning, Ms. Mandel. So you met Becky in 2013, correct?
Yes.
And that was through Q-Town CrossFit.
Yes.
Did you also meet Tim in 2013?
Yes.
And that was also through Q-Town CrossFit.
Yes.
Did you coach with Becky?
Yes. I coached CrossFit kids
Okay, and how long did you and Becky coach together?
around 2 years.
Okay, and did you coach with Tim?
I worked for Tim.
Okay, and how long did you work for Tim?
Same amount of time.
Okay. When did you move to California?
2014, I believe.
Okay, so between
14 or 15, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So between 2013, when you met Tim and Becky, and the time that you moved to California, did you ever hang out with Becky socially outside of the gym?
Yes, we did events for it was mostly gym related, yes. And then we drove to, I believe, St. Louis for CrossFit Kids certification. So we spent the whole weekend together.
Okay, and did you ever hang out with Tim socially?
It was all gym related.
Okay, so your involvement with Tim and Becky outside of the gym was gym-related events?
Usually, or fundraisers.
Okay, that's fair. Were you ever a guest in their home?
I've been to their home 1 or 2 times before.
Okay, and were they ever a guest in your home?
Not that I can remember.
Okay. After you moved away from Quincy, did you maintain contact with Tim?
I had visited for a fundraiser event that I'm sure he was at. I don't remember having a lot of contact with him. It was usually Becky.
Okay. Do you remember the last time you would have seen Tim in person before today?
It would have been the fundraiser for Dancer Love Foundation if he was attending.
Okay, and do you know how long ago that was?
Maybe 4 years ago. I'm honestly not sure.
Okay, and in that time, you did not maintain frequent contact with Tim, correct?
No,
Okay.
I don't think we have talked since I've worked for him or any kind of fundraiser that Q-Town hosted if I came back for it.
Okay, and after you moved away from Quincy, did you maintain frequent contact with Becky?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. After you moved away from Quincy, did you maintain contact with Becky?
We talked on Facebook. We would say happy birthday to each other, like brief check-ins, just like anyone I was friends with at that gym.
Okay, and how often would you and her have contact?
We hadn't had to contact for a while. That conversation was maybe a year after the last like deep conversation that we had had.
Okay, thank you. So 2021, prior to March 14th of 2022, the last substantive conversation that you had with Becky would have been in 2021.
That would be my rough guess, other than just small talk, catching up about things that had gone on.
Sure. And then you and her had this message in March of 2022, correct?
Yes.
And at least in March of 2022, she was telling you that she felt safe at that time, correct? At least that's what it said in the message, correct?
She said she needed a security system and that she also was fearful that Tim would do something to hurt her, so safe can mean.
Ma'am, I'm just asking you what she told you in that message. And in that message, she told you in her own words that she felt safe, correct?
Objection. That's not what the message said, and I think the witness answered what the message said.
Ms. Dock, you wish to be heard.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm asking her to confirm what the message said, and that was in March of 2022, she felt safe.
The court's going to sustain the objection. That's only part of the message. The message can be referred to in full, so the answer that she gave will stand.
After you had this conversation with Becky, you didn't reach out to any of her family members, correct?
No,
You didn't call her mom and tell her mom that Becky's in danger, correct?
No, she
You
was.
didn't call her dad and say, Becky's scared, she needs help, did you?
If she would have asked me to do that, I would
You
have.
didn't do that, did you?
I did not.
And she did not ask you, did she?
She did not.
You did not reach out to her sister and tell your sister something might be going on with Becky, correct?
I did not.
You did not reach out to Becky's brother-in-law and say, Becky's scared, she might need some help, did you?
No.
You did not reach out to any of her attorneys and say, Becky is scared of Tim, she needs help, did you?
I had asked, it's not on that message, but
So
I
you
did
didn't
ask if
ask.
she
You
needed
didn't
help.
ask her, you didn't reach out to her attorneys, did you?
No, but I asked
You
if
did
she
not
needed help.
tell her to go, in these messages that you just testified to, you did not tell her to go get an order of protection, did you?
I asked if she had gone to the police. There's way more
In
messages than
these messages
that.
that you just testified to, ma'am, you did not tell her to go to the police, did you?
There was a very long conversation and not all
Ma'am,
of it is posted,
It's a
so.
yes or no question. Did you
I
tell
did.
her?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative.
That will be sustained. That's asked and answered. May go on.
Did you refer her to a domestic violence shelter?
No.
No other questions, Judge.
Questions, Ms. Keck?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Ms. Mandel, do you wish that you would have reached out to Becky's parents or her family?
I honestly was scared for her boys because I felt like there was more conversation.
Objection, Your Honor, this is non-responsive.
There was more
That will be sustained.
There was a very long
No,
conversation.
you can't-
Oh, sorry.
You can't answer that question. Ms. Keck's going to ask you another question. Go ahead.
Ms. Mandel, there were other messages between you and Becky that we didn't talk about this morning,
Yes.
correct?
Lots of them.
And in those messages, you talked to her about,
Objection.
That will, counsel? Right, that objection is overruled. You may ask your question, Ms. Keck.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Mandel, during this March 14th conversation, did you discuss with Becky different options to keep her safe?
Yes.
Tell us what you discussed.
I know for sure that I wanted to do something to help her, and I wanted her to tell me what that could be. I know that she tried to file for a restraining order, and I just thought, like,
Objection.
That will be sustained.
You
Must,
guys discussed different options during
Yeah.
that conversation, is that fair to say?
yes.
No other questions, Your Honor.
going to give you another chance, Ms. Schnock, if you wish.
Despite all those options, you did nothing, correct?
I did what I thought was right in that moment, and that was to listen.
No other questions, Judge.
Any other questions, Ms. Keck?
No, Your Honor,
All
thank
right,
you.
ma'am, you may step down. She released from her subpoena for the people?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd ask that she be released.
Any objection, Ms. Schnock?
No.
All right. You're free to go, ma'am. Call your next witness.
People would call Kelly Massachusetts?
Okay? Make sure you have her spell her last name.
Maybe twice, Your Honor.
Ma'am, if you could step to the front of the courtroom, please. And then raise your right hand and be sworn by the clerk.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony may give in a cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
Okay, and if you'll come around here and have a seat right here in this chair. Then kind of scoot up to the table to where you're comfortable and bend the microphone in front of you, and you may inquire.
Can you tell me your name and please spell your last name?
Yes, my name is Kelly Massajuski. The last name is Maciejeweski.
Ms. Massajuski, what do you do for a living?
I work at the Illinois State Police Forensic Science Laboratory in Springfield.
What do you do for a living?
I primarily, solely work in the biology and DNA section.
How long have you been?
I've been employed with the state police in biology and DNA since October of 2001.
Tell me how you got that job. Was there any training you had to do before you even applied for the job?
Yes, well, my undergraduate degree was in biology and English from Albion College, which is in Albion, Michigan. And then I also have my Master's of Science in Forensic Science from the University of Illinois in Chicago. Once I was employed by the state police, I underwent an approximately 2-year training program with them specific to the discipline of biology and DNA analysis.
Can you tell me about a 2-year training program? What does that entail?
It entailed practical work in the laboratory as well as literature readings and the background of forensic biology and DNA. It involved tests, practical or supervised casework, which was where you work real casework under the direction of a supervised analyst. So all of that was within that 2-year training program.
And then at the end of that 2-year training program, did you have to test or get some type of certification to show that you obtain the requisite knowledge to do the job?
Well, that was sort of done throughout the time period of that 2 years where we had exams and things that we had to pass, both in the laboratory and written exams. And then, of course, that supervised casework where you're working the actual casework under the direction of an analyst. They had to agree that you were knowledgeable and trained in the discipline.
And did you pass all those tests?
Yes, I did.
After passing those tests and doing the job with the Illinois State Police, do you have to continue to be retested and recertified during those years?
Yes, we take 2 proficiency tests every year. And what that is it's just an outside vendor sends us a test with where they obviously know the results, and then we have to do the testing and report our results out to them and obtain the correct results.
And have you passed all those tests as well?
Yes, I have.
At this point, we'd ask that Ms. Massajuski, subject to any cross-examination, be certified as an expert in the area of DNA biology.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
She will be certified as an expert.
Ms. Massajuski, first I want to talk to you about some testing you did in this case, specifically with regard to a set of bike handlebars. You remember that item?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell me, let's talk in general sense with relation to that bike handlebars, how DNA works. What is DNA in some sense?
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and essentially what it is it's the building block of life. It's present in all cells, and it's what makes us who we are. It makes us human as compared to any other animal. It gives us our distinguishing characteristics then, which make us different from one another. Most of our DNA is, of course, the same, which is what makes us human, but there are differences among our DNA, which is what makes us all unique.
Your job then in that DNA section is to find DNA on different items and compare it to known standards to see if you can make the comparison. Is that fair to say?
Yes, the primary goal is to try and determine who may have been a contributor to any specific item.
In this case, with the set of the bike handlebars, explain for me how you go about that process. What's your first step?
The first step in the DNA process? The first step in the DNA process is what I tend to think of as just a washing machine for DNA. It's to remove the DNA off of the surface that it's on. So in the case of the bike handlebars, I collected a swab from those handlebars, and then I needed to perform the DNA extraction to remove the DNA from that swab and get it into a purified form. So it basically takes the DNA off of the swab, but also gets rid of all of the other cellular material so that what I'm left with is purified DNA in a tube.
Once you have that purified DNA, what do you do?
From that point, I would do the quantitation step, which is to determine how much DNA I was able to recover.
And after you determine, why is that important, how much DNA you recover?
For our testing system, which I will get into as I further explain the process, we have to have specific amounts of DNA to even attempt to try to get a profile, and really to determine if any human DNA is present there at all.
In this case, with regard to bike handles, were you able to recover any DNA?
Yes, I was.
And what was your next step? After you recovered the DNA, after you determined if there was enough, what did you do next?
I did have a limited amount of DNA from those handlebars, in which case then I performed what's called an amplification step, which is more or less a Xerox machine for DNA. It makes millions of identical copies of the DNA that I was able to recover. And that step is necessary for the DNA profiling, which is putting on the instrumentation that we use, which generates the end product or the DNA profile.
You did that in this case. After you did that, after you did the amplification process, what's the next step?
From that point, then I will take a look at the data. I will determine how many contributors there may be present from that sample. DNA is not just always from a single person. Anything that is touched or handled, DNA is left behind. So it could be from multiple people to 3 or more people. So I have to take a look at the data to determine how many contributors I believe to be present on that. And then I use a program that I input my data into, and it will sort out the contributors to that sample and give DNA types that are the possible or plausible types into that DNA sample.
And what's that program called?
That program is StarMix, STRMIX.
Has StarMix been testified about in other cases?
Yes, it has.
Has been accepted in the scientific community as the best test to be using at this point for DNA testing?
Yes, it's a program that's used throughout the country in order to evaluate the DNA profiles.
In this case, after you amplified the DNA from the bite and put it into the StarMix program, what's the next step after that?
The next step after that is if you have standards for comparison to that profile or profiles, if it's a mixture, you then can input those standards into the StarMix program. And what it does is it determines if the data is best explained by that standard or person being a contributor to the sample, or if there's more support for that person to not be a contributor or be eliminated. So it weighs whether there is, it's more likely that the person is a contributor or is not a contributor.
In this case, you had some known standards,
I did, yes,
and you had known standards for the defendant, is that right?
correct,
You had known standards for an individual by the name of Ted Johnson,
correct,
and you had known standards for 3 young children, is that right?
yes,
And those 3 young children were Becky's 3 children, is that right?
that's my understanding, yes,
You also had a known standard, I believe, for the victim's Becky Bliefnick.
yes,
I think that's all the known standards you have, is that correct?
yes.
With regard to the bike handlebars, when you compared through your StarMix program, the unknown sample with the known standards, were all of those individuals excluded from the bike handlebar?
Yes, the bike handlebars, I determined to be from a single individual on the ones, I had 2 swabs that I had collected from the handlebars, but the one swab was a single source profile. And that single source profile, all of the standards I had were excluded from that profile.
I want to move on then to item 2A and 2B, which were swabs from a chair that were found outside the victim's residence.
Are you referring to my item numbers?
I
or-
apologize, 20A and 20B, I said 2. I
Yes,
apologize.
correct.
20A and 20B.
That's correct.
Did you test those swabs?
Yes, I did.
And was there any DNA on those swabs?
There was an extremely limited amount of DNA present on those swabs. I did attempt to profile them, but the data was so limited in nature that it was not suitable for any sort of comparisons.
I want to move on then to items 17A and 17B. Those are swabs from a bedroom door, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you tested those as well?
Yes, I did.
And you put those into that StarMix program because I believe in this case, there was a mixture of DNA, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
With regard to 17B and Ted Johnson was excluded from providing that sample, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And with regard to Ted Johnson in 17A, there was limited support for the proposition that Ted Johnson is not a contributor to that DNA, correct?
Yes, there was more support that he was not a contributor to that sample.
With regard to the defendant in both 17A and 17B, there was limited support for the proposition that Tim Bliefnick, the defendant, is not a contributor for both 17A and 17B. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. There was more support that he was not a contributor to that sample.
And with regard to who it was likely the DNA was from, there was moderate support or strong support for both 17A and 17B that the DNA belonged to Rebecca Bliefnick and one of the children.
Yes, that is correct.
I want to move on then to item 10A, which is a piece of plastic material that was found around the victim's body. Is that correct?
Yes.
And again, you did all that testing on it, and it was a mixture of DNA, correct?
Yes, it was.
And one of those individuals, the DNA on that was strong support that it was Rebecca Bliefnick's DNA.
Yes, there was strong support that she was a contributor to that sample.
You tested that sample against Ted Johnson,
Correct.
and in your expert opinion, there was very strong support for the proposition that Ted Johnson was not a contributor to that DNA profile.
Yes, that's correct. It is more likely to be explained by it being unknown individuals as opposed to him being a contributor to that sample.
In fact, it's 2.6 million times more likely, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You also tested that sample against the defendant's DNA,
Yes, I did.
and there was limited support for the proposition that the defendant is a contributor to that DNA sample.
Yes, there was more support for him being a contributor to that sample as opposed to not being a contributor. However, that support was limited in nature.
In fact, it's 8 times more likely that the DNA originated from the defendant and an unknown, unrelated individual than if it came from 2 unknown, unrelated individuals.
Yes, there's more support for him being a contributor to that sample as opposed to not being a contributor.
I want to talk to you then about one other area of testing that you did, and that was specifically some fingernail clippings.
Okay.
You did some testing on some fingernail clippings,
Yes, I did.
specifically the fingernail clippings of the victim, Becky Bliefnick, is that right?
Correct.
Now, that was a different type of testing than Starbucks, correct?
Yes, I did not use star mix for the final interpretation step of those samples. And that is because when I did the quantitation step from the fingernails, the swabs that I had collected from the fingernails, it gave me an indication that I had a much larger amount of female DNA present as opposed to male DNA. And the level of male DNA that I was detecting would have never been observed in our standard type of testing that we perform.
So based on that, did you do a different type of testing?
Yes, I did.
And that's called YSTR testing, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Can you describe for me just briefly what YSTR testing is?
Yes, YSTR testing, what it is it's looking at DNA on the Y chromosome, which is only present in males. And so when I perform YSTR testing, I have the ability to essentially ignore all of the female DNA that is present because I'm targeting DNA specific on that Y chromosome, which females do not have. So when I perform the YSTR testing, I'm only going to pick up the male DNA that is present on that Y chromosome.
And in this case, you did that testing.
Yes, I did.
And is it fair to say, in your expert opinion, that it is 3 times more likely that the DNA profile that you observed underneath the victim's fingernails came from the defendant or the boys than anyone else?
Yes, in testing the 3 standards from the children as well as from Timothy Bliefnick, all of those individuals would be included as a potential contributor of the YSTR profile. And I should clarify with YSTRs that YSTR types are carried down a paternal line. So any male DNA that is present will also be the same DNA profile that is present in a father's sons, any brothers that he may have, his father. They will all have the same YSTR DNA profile.
Now, that DNA profile, Ted Johnson was completely excluded from the DNA under Becky Bliefnick's fingernail.
Yes, that is correct.
In a general sense, is it fair to say that of the items in the crime scene, there are no items that support the conclusion that Ted Johnson is associated or his DNA is associated with them?
Correct, none of the items that I tested.
And is it fair to say that there are items that support the conclusion that Tim Bliefnick and his DNA are associated with them?
Yes, I did have the items, the fingernails, as well as the plastic pieces that were found on Becky Bliefnick's body that had some support for that being a contribution from Timothy Bliefnick.
And one of those was 8 times more likely, and the other was 3 times.
Yes, that is correct.
Just a moment, Your Honor. Apologize, I forgot to ask you about the item 8A, the looter casing in the hallway.
Yes,
That was tested for DNA as well.
yes, it was.
And Ted Johnson and the defendant were excluded from that.
That's correct, yes.
And Becky Bliefnick's DNA was found on that shell casing that was, of course, on her carpet.
Yes, I had a single source DNA profile from that casing, and that was consistent with the profile of Becky Bliefnick.
That's all.
Cross, Ms. Schultz.
Ms. Masajewski, I have some questions for you.
Okay.
If you don't understand my questions or if they don't make sense, let me know, okay?
Okay.
All right, so generally speaking, in your field, can DNA be transferred from one item to another?
Yes.
Okay, so if, say, for example, I have a bag and I send this bag with my son to his grandparents' house, would you likely find my DNA on my son's bag?
It's hard to say likely, but depending on your extent of contact with it and amount of touching, that it's definitely a possibility, yes.
Okay, so again, if I pack that bag and I send that bag to Grandma and Grandpa's house, you could very well find my DNA at Grandma and Grandpa's house, even though I hadn't personally been in Grandma and Grandpa's house.
Again, potentially, yes. Again, depending on the extent of where the bag was put, how it was handled, how much DNA was originally on it. There are a lot of factors, but it's a possibility,
All right,
yes.
thank you. The first item that you talked about that you tested were bike handlebars.
Yes.
When you received those, were the bike handlebars attached to the bike or had they been removed?
They had been removed.
Okay, and did you personally swab the bike handlebars or did somebody else do that for you and then provided you the sample?
I collected the swabs off of the handlebars. I collected one swab from the right side and then one swab from the left side.
All right. And one of those samples, there was not enough DNA for you to test, correct?
Yes, I did profile the sample, but there was not enough DNA. It was very limited in nature, that it was not suitable for interpretations.
Okay.
And then the other swab had that single source profile that did not match any of the standards that I had testified to previously.
Okay. And those, through your testing, you were able to come up with one DNA profile for those bike handlebars, correct?
That's correct.
And Tim Bliefnick was excluded as a contributor for those bike handlebars, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And during your investigation and your testing, you were unable to come up with any DNA match for those bike handlebars, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You also talked about swabbing some outside chairs, and I think those would have been lab item 20 and agency number 26, correct?
It was our items. I received 2 swabs. Those were not collected by me. They were collected by someone else, and the swabs were sent to our laboratory. I received 2 swabs, and I labeled them as 20A and 20B. Throughout my testing, I then combined those swabs because both were extremely limited in how much DNA was able to be obtained from them, so I combined them to try to get the best possible DNA profile.
And there was nothing that you were able to come up with, correct?
Yes, the DNA was still so limited in nature, it was not suitable for any comparisons.
All right. And as far as the, you were talking about the Y-star mix. So in how many different samples were you given to test against?
In total for the entire case, may I consult my notes?
Sure.
Not including standards, I had 19 samples that I performed DNA testing on.
Okay. And with respect to the Y-star testing, let's say 5 of those samples were of a father and his 4 male children.
Okay.
Would you be able to distinguish one profile from another in that scenario?
Based on, there can be mutations occasionally with a father to his male children. However, in this case, there were no mutations for the standards that I tested, which that being of Timothy Bliefnick and his 3 male children. They all had the exact same YSTR profile.
Okay, and that would not be surprising, given the nature of how DNA works and the Y chromosome being attached to the male.
Yes, that is
Fair.
correct.
And so, based on the Y-star testing, you cannot tell between Tim or Arlen or Grayson, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And can you tell if any of them should be excluded, or are they all included because they cannot be excluded?
Are you talking from the fingernails?
Yes.
No, they would, I cannot tell that any of them are excluded because they have the same DNA type that I was able to pull up with that YSTR testing, and it's consistent with all of them. So I can't tell you which one it may be or may not be.
You also tested some shell casings, correct?
Yes.
And none of those shell casings had matched, or you were unable to pull a DNA profile from any of those shell casings that matched Tim's DNA profile, correct?
Are you referring to the shell casings that were my item 1A?
Yes.
Yes, that is correct. I had 7 shell casings that were swabbed. They were all found in a similar location. They were swabbed all together, and I did attempt to DNA profile them. However, the DNA recovered was so limited in nature, it was not suitable to do anything further with and not suitable for comparison to any standards.
Were you given any hair fibers to test against?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. Were you given any clothing items to test against?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
May I interject? I just recalled one item.
Okay.
I did receive a pair of work gloves.
Okay, and there was no DNA that was recovered from those work gloves?
I examined those for the presence of blood, and there was no blood found on them. I did not do anything further beyond that.
Okay, and to take one step back, just to be specific, item 8A was the shell casing that you tested from Becky's home, correct?
Yes, that shell casing was found separate from the others I just spoke about that were limited in nature and not able to be compared to standards. That one was found in the hallway, and so it was swabbed separately, and that had a DNA profile that was consistent with that of Becky Bliefnick.
Okay, and that, there was one DNA profile on item 8A, and you were able to exclude Tim, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Your Honor, if I could have a moment.
You may.
Your Honor, I don't have any other questions.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you may step down. And is she released from her subpoena and free to go?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. You're free to go, ma'am.
She should probably wait around because I think she's writing some other lab people, so.
Okay. Call your next witness.
Would call Jim Riggins for this one.
Sir, if you will step up to the front of the courtroom, please. And then raise your right hand and be sworn by the clerk.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in a cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. Okay, and then if you'll come around here, please, have a seat right here. And then kind of scoot up to the table to where you're comfortable, and then bend that microphone so it's in front of you and speak towards the microphone, please. You may inquire.
Can you tell me your name, please?
James Riggins.
And what do you do for a living, Mr. Riggins?
I'm a forensic scientist,
How long have you done that?
17 and a half years.
Who do you work for?
Illinois State Police.
You've worked for them all 17 and a half years of your career?
Yes, I have.
Mr. Riggins, before you got the job with the Illinois State Police as a forensic scientist, did you do any training to get that job?
Yes.
Can you tell us briefly what that training consisted of?
Well, it included 7 months of training in paint analysis, 8 months of training in glass analysis, 9 months of training in fire debris analysis, week training in physical match analysis, and also a couple days of primary gunshot residue collection.
I guess I should ask you, as a forensic scientist, is there a particular area that you are tasked with doing that job?
It's called trace chemistry analysis.
After you did that training and got the job with the Illinois State Police, are there additional tests or certifications that you have to receive on a yearly basis to continue your employment?
Yes, they're called proficiency tests. You must complete them. It's a 100%, and you're given an unknown to where you have to match it.
And it has to be 100%. You miss any, you're gone.
You go.
Have you passed all those tests?
Yes, I have.
Every test for the last 17 and a half years?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, at this point, we would ask that the witness be identified as an expert in the area of trace chemistry and ion analysis.
Any objection, Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
He will be so certified.
Mr. Riggins, I want to talk to you in a general sense then about what you do if you're given an item and asked to compare that item to determine, if it's inconclusive, a match, whatever phrases you use as a forensic scientist, okay?
Yes.
Can you tell us in a general sense what it is when you receive some sample or are asked to compare it?
Yes, I examine it microscopically and then by way of visual acuity. Just examine the class characteristics of it, and that includes things like the color, the dimensions, size, if there are perforations. And then I analyze that information to propose that if there's a physical match or not.
In this case, were you given some items and asked to do such a comparison?
Yes, I will.
When you do that examination, do you also take photographs that are to document your work in a sense?
Yes, they're called record shots, yes.
They're called what?
Record shots.
Record shots?
Yes.
If I could approach you with,
You may.
I'm going to hand you a group exhibit. Well, they're marked individually with different exhibit numbers. I'm asking you to take a look at those photographs and tell me when you've had a chance to review all those photographs.
Yes, complete.
Have you had a chance to review all those?
Yes, I did.
Are those all photographs that you took in the process of doing that comparison?
Yes, they are.
The record shots that you described to us?
Correct.
Your Honor, we'd ask, and they fairly show what they're intended to show.
Correct, yes.
Your Honor, we'd ask that People's Exhibits 135 through 143 be introduced into evidence and leaked to publish as a presentation.
Any objection, Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
They will be admitted.
We could have 135. Mr. Riggins, are these the pieces of plastic that you were provided, and it's your item 10-2, but for the record, it is also Exhibit 240 that's been previously introduced into evidence. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So you said you would take these items, look at them visually, and then eventually compare them to something else. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
In this case, were you given another item to compare them to?
Yes, I was.
Next slide. On the screen now, in the middle of the screen is what we have up on the screen is Exhibit 136. In the middle of the screen, we have item 33-6. Is that the item that you were given to compare it to?
Yes,
And again, for the record, that is our Exhibit 240, which is all the bags from the defendant saw, correct?
yes.
And next to the side of it is item 10-2, one of those pieces of plastic.
Correct.
Tell me how you compare that piece of plastic to the Aldi bag.
Similarities, I look at the class characteristics, which include color, surface markings, and also the texture, the type of material that are included in both of those items.
Well, let's talk about first the texture of item 33-6 and item 10-2. Did the texture of the item appear to be the same to you?
Yes,
You said you also talked about color, so would you look at the pink that's on the Aldi bag and the pink that's on the piece of plastic?
yes.
It appear to be the same color?
It's similar in characteristics, yes.
And then next to the pink is a green piece of plastic, right? Next to the pink here, touching the pink is green, right? Well,
Yes, yellowish green, yeah, bright yellow.
it's a color that appears to be some shade of yellowish green.
Yes, yes.
And on the piece of plastic, did you notice that same weird, strange shade of color?
Yes, I did.
And next to that, how about orange? We call that orange.
Yes,
And next to the piece of green on that is orange, is that right?
yes,
And next to the orange is white.
correct.
And you see white on that piece of plastic.
Yes.
Is the next step in your analysis to see if that piece of plastic basically fits over the Aldi bag in a same location?
Yes, compare as close as I can, yes.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes, I did.
Next slide, please. And here we showed it going closer.
Yes, yes.
And that's equals 137. Next slide. And here we see the piece of plastic laid on top of the Aldi bag, correct?
Correct.
And you see the pink appears to match, that color appears to match, the orange appears to match, the white appears to match.
Correct.
And in fact, you see between the pink and the orange a little stripe of white that would appear to match as well.
Yes.
Next slide, please. And again, just a closer view
Correct.
of that. Now, your report says that this is not a match, correct? You can't say it's a match.
I can only note that there were similarities in the characteristics. However, due to the lack of a broken, cut, or torn in any of the 18 bags that were compared to, a physical match is precluded.
So your report says it's inconclusive but consistent with similar characteristics.
Yes.
You also, next slide please, had item 13, which is another set of pieces of plastic, which I believe are Exhibit 142. Is that correct?
Yes, the item number
Item
13, lab item 13.
And you did the same testing that you just talked about before with these pieces of plastic as well, is that right?
Yes, and it was noted as that they were printed letters.
And you see the letters here and some letters there.
Yes.
Next slide, please. And there was some printed letters on item 33-6 as well, correct?
Yes.
On the bottom of the bag.
Right.
And you did that same thing where you would put the piece of plastic on the Aldi bag to see if it's similar.
Correct.
Next slide, please. And this is Exhibit 142, showing it right above the printed lettering.
Correct, yes.
And 143, please. And this is the piece of plastic on top of the printed lettering on the item 3360, Aldi bag from the defendant.
Yes.
And again, your report says inconclusive, fair to say?
Yes.
But again, there are consistencies between the two pieces with similar class characteristics.
Yes.
But you can't say, as a scientist, that that is a match,
Correct.
because you don't have the bag that it was torn out from.
Correct. Yes.
That's all the questions I have.
Questions, Ms. Stein?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Sir, in conducting your testing, you were given 18 whole grocery bags, is that fair?
That is fair. Yes.
And then you were given partial fragments to compare that to, correct?
Yes. Correct.
And the only thing that you can tell us that there were similarities between the little pieces of plastic that you were given and the larger grocery bags that were provided, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And you cannot say with scientific certainty that they are a match, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
And you cannot tell us where the bags came from, correct?
Correct.
You can't tell us where they were produced, correct?
Correct.
You can't tell us how old they are, correct?
Correct.
The only thing that you can tell us is that those 18 bags looked similar to the plastic pieces, but you can't say with scientific certainty that there's any correlation or that there's a match between those two, correct?
That is correct. Not a match.
No other questions, Judge?
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you may step down. And is he released with the subpoena?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection, Ms. Stein?
No.
All right. Free to go, sir.
Thank you.
Call your next witness.
We would call Catherine Buell.
Ma'am, if you could step up to the front of the courtroom, please. You may. Go ahead and raise your right hand and be sworn by the clerk.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in a cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
Okay. Then if you'll come around here and have a seat right here in this chair. And kind of scoot up to the table to where you're comfortable, and then bend that microphone so it's in front of you. And then in just a minute, when we're ready, we're going to have you speak towards the microphone, okay?
Can you tell me your name, please?
My name is Catherine Doolin, and it's spelled Kathryn. Doolin is Doolin.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a forensic scientist at the Illinois State Police.
What type of forensic science do you specifically practice, or is there a particular area that you're responsible for?
I'm a forensic scientist specializing in firearms, tool marks, tire track, and footwear analysis.
Ms. Doolin, how did you get that job? Was there any specialized training you had to do?
I graduated from the University of Missouri-Columbia with a Bachelor in Science in 2013 and a minor in psychology. And is when I was trained by the Illinois State Police during my employment for the specialized fields.
How long was that training?
For firearms, it was an 18-month modular-based program. For tool marks, it was 6 months, and for footwear and tire track, it was 8 months.
And in that program, are there required testing that you have to complete in order to pass that program?
Yes, there are.
And did you pass all those tests?
Yes, I did.
Since you've been working for the Illinois State Police, and how long have you been working for them?
I've been working since February of 2018. 15.
Since you've been working for them for about the last 8 years, are there continuing testing that you have to do on a yearly basis in order to show proficiency and keep you up?
Yes, we have yearly proficiency tests that I'm required to pass.
And those are 100%, you have to pass that with a 100% score or you're gone.
Correct.
And you've done that every year, right?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, we would ask that the witness be identified as an expert in the area of tool marks and shoe prints.
Any objection, Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
She will be so certified as an expert.
Ms. Newland, in this case, I want to start with a shoe print that you were provided, okay?
Okay,
And you were in fact provided a shoe print. We've seen some pictures of that. Is that right?
that's correct.
When you were provided with that shoe print, did you make any notice anything about it?
I received a piece of carpet with a left partial footwear impression on it.
Well, when you say partial, what does that mean when you say partial shoe print?
That the shoe print was not complete, that it did not go from toe to heel and was not complete. It only showed the toe and the arch area.
Because of that, because you did not have a complete heel, is it limited in what you can do?
Yes, it is.
So, for example, if I ask you to tell me what size that shoe print was, can you do that?
I cannot.
Can you even give us a range of what size it could be?
I cannot give a size based on a shoe print or an outsole itself due to different shoes having various outsole sizes, and different manufacturers can have a different size. Say Adidas can have the same size, size 13 versus a work boot could be a different size 13.
So is it fair to say that different manufacturers could have different sizes? So an Adidas 13 might not be the same as a Nike 13.
That's correct.
And an Adidas outsole on a size 13 might be bigger or smaller than a work boot outsole, the bottom of the shoe.
That's correct.
In fact, it's more correct to call it a shoe print than a footwear. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
You can't tell us how that shoe print got there?
No, I cannot.
You can't tell us anything about that shoe print at this point other than that it's a partial shoe print.
That's correct.
In this case, you were given a pair of shoes to compare that shoe print with.
Yes, I was.
You're able to do that even with just the partial print. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I'm able to make test impressions of the shoes and compare them directly to the impression that was left on the carpet.
The shoes that you were given, you were able to eliminate them.
Yes, I was.
So the shoes that you were given did not make that shoe print.
No, they did not.
Now, you're not able to say that the defendant didn't make those shoe prints, just
Objection.
not that the shoes.
That-
did.
Objection.
Stop, Mr. Jones. What's,
It's argumentative.
that will be sustained. Rephrase your question, Mr. Jones.
You're only able to tell us that the shoes that you were given didn't make the shoe.
That's correct.
Even if you had the shoes, you couldn't tell us who wore the shoes.
That's correct.
I want to move on then to the area of tool marks. Can you tell us how, in general, tool marks are compared to tools?
So when a tool is submitted to the lab, I make test marks of the tool and compare the test marks that I make and compare them to the unknown or suspect tool marks that are left at the scene under a comparison microscope, and look for microscopic reproduction agreement of the detail within the marks to determine if that tool made those tool marks left at the scene.
So in layman's terms, you take the tool that you're provided, you try to make a tool mark that's similar to the tool mark that you have, and then you compare the two microscopically and see if there's similarities.
Yes, I do.
When you're given a particular tool and do that, can you describe for me the difficulty in making a similar tool mark?
Yes, so tool marks is a little different because the angle at which the tool was used, the pressure at which the tool was used, the material in which the tool marks were made, all affect how the reproduction of that tool mark is made. So it is difficult to reproduce exactly the circumstances that were at the scene versus at the crime lab.
In other words, in order to compare the tool marks and get what we'll refer to as a match, you have to exactly duplicate the manner in which the tool was used to make those marks?
Yes, in the area that the tool comes in contact with the surface at the scene has to be the exact location in order to get that replication.
So you have to use the same angle,
Correct?
the same pressure,
Correct?
the same force,
Correct?
the same manner that it's used in,
That's correct, as well as the same materials.
and the same material.
Mhm.
In this case, were you given a window that had some tool marks on it?
Yes, I was.
And in fact, you were given at one point a multi-tool from the defendant's car, is that right?
That's correct.
That you were able to exclude from making those same marks.
Yes, I was.
You were also given a crowbar, correct?
Yes, I was.
And Ms. Doolin, when you did the comparison, do you take those record shots that we heard Mr. Riggins testify about?
I do take record shots for each case that I work.
And you took some record shots in this case, is that right?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as People's Exhibits 178 to 184. I'm going to ask you to look at those. Have you had a chance to look at those?
Yes, I have.
Are those the record shots, the photographs that you took in this case of that examination?
Yes, they were.
Your Honor, we'd ask that people 178 through 184 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection, Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
They will be admitted.
You have the first slide, please. Ms. Doolin, up on the screen is a crowbar, a pry bar, lab item 31, which is our exhibit 237. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Is that the crowbar, the pry bar that you used in testing?
Yes, it was.
Next slide, please. Now on the screen is exhibit 179. Is that the same pry bar but flipped over on the other side?
Yes, it is.
Next slide, please. Here we have a close-up of what you call working edges A and B. Can you tell me what that means, working edges?
Yes, so this is the area on the pry bar of interest that I used to make the test marks to compare to the unknown tool marks.
And equals 181. And that's working edges C and D, is that right?
Yeah, so that's just the opposite side of A and B.
Moving on to equals 182. What are we looking at here?
So this is a record shot of one of the tool marks that was recorded on the window that was submitted to the lab.
And you told us that you used that crowbar, working edges A and B, to try to recreate these tool marks.
Yes, I did.
And when you did that, you then looked at both under a microscope and compared them.
Yes, I compared them on the comparison microscope.
When you compared the tool marks that you made and the tool marks in 54-1, did you notice similarities and consistencies between the two tool marks?
Yes, I did.
Can you explain for us then, if you notice these consistencies and these similarities between the tool mark that you made with the crowbar in the defendant's basement and the tool marks here, why your report says inconclusive?
I went inconclusive between the pry bar and the tool marks on the window because there was not enough detail in the microscopic detail in the tool mark between this unknown tool mark and the test marks I made to make a complete identification.
But again, you notice similarities and consistencies between the two.
Correct.
People's 183. Again, just a close-up of that tool mark that had the similarities and consistencies with the tool mark that you made,
That's correct.
and people's 184. Just another angle of that same thing.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that you can't eliminate that tool from making that tool mark, but there are not enough similarities? You notice those similarities, but not enough because you couldn't recreate the exact circumstances of how the tool mark was made to say that it's a knife.
That's correct.
That's all the questions I have.
Cross, Ms. Schnock.
Ms. Doolin, I have a few questions for you, okay? So bear with me. When you're doing testing, whether it's in this case or any other case, you put your findings into a report, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And in those reports, you tell us what you tested and what your findings are, correct?
That's correct.
And you did that in this case with respect to the footwear impression as well as the pry bar marks, correct?
That's correct.
And I want to first talk about the footwear impressions, okay? You were given one left shoe that was a size 13 Reebok CrossFit athletic shoe, correct?
Correct.
And you were also given a right Reebok CrossFit athletic shoe that was a size 13, correct?
Correct.
You were not given any other shoes to test, correct?
No, I was not.
And you were not given any photographs of any other shoes to compare or test against, correct?
No, I did not.
Okay. And in your testing, you were able to eliminate both the left and right shoe, correct?
That's correct.
And that was put into a report, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Ms. Doolin, I'm handing you what's marked as Defendant's Exhibit 2.
Okay.
And this is with respect to the footwear impression, and take a look at that. And let me know when you've had time to go over it.
Okay.
Okay, is that your report?
Yes, it is.
And is that your signature on the last page of the report?
Yes, it is.
And is that the report where you specifically state that those shoes were excluded against the foot impression that you were given from the crime scene?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I would ask the defendant's exhibit to be admitted, and I don't have any other questions
Any-
with respect to that exhibit.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor, that's fine.
That will be admitted.
Now, with respect to the pry bar and the multi-tool, again, you did a similar report after you did your testing, correct?
Correct.
And with respect to the multi-tool and the pry bar, you were given those to test against some casts that were made on the window from the crime scene, correct?
I was given them to compare to the tool marks made on the window.
Okay, and were you given the actual window from the crime scene, or were you given a cast?
I was given the actual window, and I made casts myself during my examination.
Okay, fair enough. And during your testing, you were able to eliminate completely the multi-tool, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, correct?
That's correct.
And you cannot say with scientific certainty whether or not the crowbar made those marks, correct?
That's correct.
And your report indicated that those findings were inconclusive, fair?
That's fair.
So you can't say with scientific certainty one way or another whether that tool made those marks, correct?
Correct.
I'm handing you what's marked as Defendant's Exhibit 3. Is that your report?
Yes, it is.
And that is your signature on the back page?
It is.
And that is where you incorporate your findings that eliminated the multi-tool, correct?
Correct.
And found the pry bar inconclusive,
Correct.
I would ask the Defendant's Exhibit 3 be admitted, Your Honor, and do not have any other questions.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, number 3 will be admitted. And no other questions, Ms. Stock?
No.
Okay, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, if you could hand those to the bailiff, please. And then is she free to go?
Yes, but she should probably wait for our next witness to finish too, so.
Well, we're going to take our morning break at this point, so since we're in between witnesses, and we'll give the jury 20 minutes, which will be approximately then 10:40. All right? Mr. Jones, you have 3 more witnesses or 2 more witnesses?
Yes, Ms. Keck. 2.
All right, and then are you going to be finished this morning, or are we going to have one this afternoon?
So here's where we are, Your Honor. Our next witness is Becky Reels, the firearms expert. I would anticipate her going 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
So at that point, I'm figuring we're at 11:15 or so. Our problem is the next witness, Nick Eddy, is our last witness. He's going to be a while.
All right.
So-
Let's leave him till this afternoon. All right, and then we'll give the jury that. And then I've told defense they don't need to have any witnesses until tomorrow anyway. So then we'll have several things to take care of, which have to be done outside the jury. So if we wait till Mr. Eddy till this afternoon, then we'll still leave us time to do those things outside the presence of the jury, and we'll just have the jury come back in tomorrow morning. Any problem with that, Mr. Jones?
Not at all, Your Honor.
Any problem with that, Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
All right. We will be in recess, and we'll be back at 10:40.
All right.
We are back on the record on 23 CF 170, People versus Timothy Bliefnick. Mr. Bliefnick appears in person, and with counsel, Ms. Casey Schnock. People appear by Assistant State's Attorney Josh Jones and Laura Keck. And Mr. Jones, anything before we bring in the jury?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
All right, let's bring in the jury. All rise.
The session is recorded now, may you see?
Mr. Jones, call your next witness.
People call Becky Reels.
Ma'am, if you'll step to the front of the courtroom, please. Raise your right hand, be sworn by the clerk.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
Okay, if you'll come around here, please. Have a seat right here on this chair. Okay, and kind of scoot up to the table to where you're comfortable and bend that microphone so it's in front of you and speak towards the microphone, please.
Okay.
You may inquire.
Can you tell me your name, please?
Vicky Reels.
And Ms. Reels, what do you do for a living?
I am a forensic scientist that specializes in firearms, footwear, and tire track examinations.
Do you do that for the Illinois State Police?
I do.
How long have you done that for?
I was hired in June of 1997. 26 years?
26?
Yeah,
Makes us so old, doesn't it?
yeah.
Ms. Reels, tell me how you got that job with the Illinois State Police. Did you have to do some specialized training before you got the job?
Well, I have a degree in biology from Illinois State University, and then once hired by the Illinois State Police You go through specialized training depending on what discipline you're being hired into. So I participated in a formal training program with the Illinois State Police that was approximately 2 years in length. The training was conducted at the Forensic Science Center at Chicago.
And that training was in the area of firearms, tool marks, tire.
That was exclusively firearms. Footwear and tire tracks, I was trained in about 10 years later, and I am not specialized for tool mark examination.
With regard to firearms, you've been doing that over the last 26 years.
Yes,
And every year you have to do another proficiency test, if you will, to keep your job.
yes.
Can you describe that test for me?
It is just a test that's supplied by an external forensic testing system where they provide items that we have to examine like we do any other evidence and report what the findings are based on the items that were received.
And you have to score 100% on that exam or you lose your job, right?
Correct.
Every year that you've taken that test for the last 26 years, have you passed that test?
Yes.
Your Honor, we'd ask that this witness be certified as an expert in the area of firearms and firearm identification.
Any objection, Ms. Schneider?
No, Your Honor.
She will be so certified.
Let's talk in a general sense then first about firearm identification and why that works. Can you explain to me the process of how a gun fires a bullet, fires a projectile?
Sure. Well, when the ammunition before it's fired is a cartridge, and that's made up of your cartridge case, your primer, your powder, and your projectile or projectiles. And when a firearm is fired and a cartridge is discharged, the bullet's going to travel down the barrel of the firearm, and at that point, oh, go ahead.
And when the bullet travels down the barrel, does the barrel leave specific marks on that bullet?
Yes, it does. It picks up the microscopic machining marks from the manufacturing process.
And does every gun have slightly different marks that it leaves on that bullet?
Yes.
And every gun leaves different marks on the bullet based on the gun. Is that fair to say?
Yes, based on the manufacturing process, beyond the classification of the class characteristics that the gun is designed with.
So is it fair to say if you have two separate guns, even of the same brand, let's say you had two different 9mm guns, same brand, everything else is the same, when that bullet is fired and it goes down the barrel, you're going to be able to tell the difference between those bullets and which guns they came out of based on the marks that are left on the bullet?
Yes, and there have been studies conducted with both bullets and cartridge cases where you have been provided like 10 consecutively manufactured barrels of a firearm from a specific manufacturer, or 10 consecutively manufactured breech faces, and given pieces of fired evidence. And we had to determine which barrel or which breech face the fired evidence was fired from.
You used a term that we may not be familiar with. I think we all know what a barrel of a gun is, but what's a breech face?
The breech face is the rear inside chamber portion of the firearm. That is where the primer seats against the gun and the firing pin strikes the primer.
And so when that breech face hits the end of the cartridge, the end of the full bolt, the cartridge, it leaves individual marks as well.
Yes,
So is it fair to say that when a gun fires a cartridge, fires a bullet, it leaves fingerprints on that shell casing and on that bullet?
yes,
And just like everyone's fingerprints are different, every gun leaves different identifying marks on every shell casing and every bullet it fires.
yes.
And it leaves the same markings on every shell casing and every bullet it fires.
It will. They won't, from one to the other, you won't necessarily have an exact reproduction, but you will see a pattern reproduce with those similarities from one item to the next in that.
And based on that, you're able to determine if you're given two shell casings, you're able to determine if those shell casings were fired from the same gun, correct?
Yes,
If you can compare them and if they have the same marks, then you know, you will, if they have the same fingerprints from that gun, you can tell that it's fired from the same gun.
yes, you're looking for that reproduction between those items.
And if you're given two bullets, the projectiles that are fired, you're able to look at those, and again, layman's terms, you can see if it has the same gun fingerprint on each of those bullets.
Yes,
In this case, were you given at first 8 shell casings from the crime scene?
Yes,
And did you compare those?
I did.
And when you compare those, do you take different photographs of your comparisons so that your work can be reviewed and also so that you have a documentation of what you've done and what you're looking at? Is that right?
That is correct.
And you did that in this case, correct?
I did.
Approach the witness.
You may.
Going to hand you what's been marked as people's 185 through 189. Can you tell me if you have a chance to look at those?
Okay.
Are those photographs that you took, your record shots, if you will, to record your work in this case?
Yes.
Your Honor, and do they accurately show what you observed and what you saw in your process?
Yes.
Your Honor, we'd ask that People's Exhibits 185 through 189 be introduced to that.
Any objection, Ms. Schnock?
No, Your Honor.
185 through 189 will be admitted and may be shown.
Tell me the process of how you compare two shell casings. How do you do that?
Well, we use a comparison microscope when comparing any two items, whether it's two bullets to each other, two cartridge cases to each other, or if we have test shots from a gun, if a gun is submitted, we can compare the bullets or cartridge cases that are known to be from that firearm to the unknown evidence. And what a comparison microscope is essentially two compound microscopes that are joined by an optical bridge. So they allow you to see two separate items on two separate stages through the same field of view, and they are actually side by side, so you can see both right next to each other.
How does that help you compare those, let's say in this case, two shell casings?
Well, what that allows you to do is to look for the reproduction of those marks, because what we're looking at is that overall pattern. So that's the length, the width, the depth, and the spatial relationship between the marks that are left on these items. And so it allows you to move across the surface of those two items and evaluate from one side to the other if those marks continue to reproduce between the two.
And in your record charts, the photographs that you take, you use that comparison microscope to take those photographs.
Yes.
We have the first slide, please. So at the top of the screen, we see that we have item 1 on the right and item 2 on the left. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And at the bottom, it says black index at 6 o'clock. Can you explain that for me?
That is just how we mark items, so that if another examiner or anyone else wants to take a look at this, they can put the two items up and phase them similar in order to go back and find the same areas that I'm looking at. So the black index at 6 o'clock actually is not visible within these two images. It is on the head stamp area of the cartridge case. So it is on the actual cartridge case itself, just not visible within the image.
The black dot at 6, or black index at 6 o'clock, basically, so you can line up those two shell casings.
Yes.
In the same
Phasing.
And magnification here is 40x, so that's 40 times what you can see with the naked eye.
Yeah, it just says that both of those, that's the level of magnification I have in order to see that detail that's shown there.
So here we have item 2 on the left, item 1 on the right. These are 2 of the 8 shell casings that were recovered from the scene, correct?
Correct.
And tell us what we're looking at here, Ms. Reels.
Well, I have a box around the area, the white box, around the area that I am representing here that you can see from one item to the other, the consistency of those lines as they continue across. So
this little white line in the middle, that's what separates item 2 from item 1.
that's correct. That is a hairline that with the microscope, I have the ability to move that line from left to right to look at those two items as as I examined them. And that's just the position that it was in when I observed that area between items 1 and 2.
And do you continue this examination, basically move this white line across the face or the back of that cartridge casing so that you can continue to see if there's more consistencies as you go forward?
Yes, I do that with each of the items.
We go to People's 186. Is this just showing, again, the same thing? You're moving that
Hairline.
hairline from left to right and comparing the markings?
Yes, that's correct. That's actually the firing pin area that I have marked there. So that's the piece that actually strikes the primer and ignites the powder within the cartridge that burns and allows the projectile to travel down the barrel.
And People's 187. And again, is this, again, we're just moving that hairline a little further to the right, and again, you're comparing the marks on where the firing pin is.
Yes,
And again, all of these are item 1 and item 2, like in at 6 o'clock, magnification 40.
correct.
You did the same comparison on all 8 of those shell casings.
Yes,
In your scientific opinion, and in the 26, using the training that you've received at the Illinois State Police, and the 26 years of experience where you've passed every test 100%, can you tell us what you can tell about those 8 shell casings?
all of the 8 shell casings that were submitted were fired by the same firearm.
I want to move on then to the bullets, the projectiles that were recovered at the scene, okay? And from Becky Bliefnick's spot. I want to talk about those. Those were lab items 16, 18, 23, 24, and 25. 16 and 18 were recovered at the scene. 23, 24, and 25 were removed during the autopsy from Becky's body, correct?
That's my understanding.
Did you do the same type of testing on those projectiles?
Yes,
Use the comparison microscope, just like you did here.
correct.
And again, you're looking for that same fingerprint, if you will, on each of those projectiles.
Correct.
And looking at lab items 16, 18, 23, 24, and 25, what can you tell me about those items?
As far as my determination,
Yes.
that those items were all identified as being fired by the same firearm.
I want to talk about the shell casings at the scene and the bullets at the scene, okay, and specifically the bullets at the scene. In looking at those bullets and the markings, the rifling that are on the bullets as they've been fired, can you tell us what the rifling is and what that means?
Well, the rifling, they're helical grooves that are manufactured in the barrel of a firearm, and the purpose of those is to stabilize the projectile in flight, similar to putting a spin on a bullet or on a football when you throw it. It's going to stabilize it so that it doesn't tumble. So rifling has that purpose, but manufacturers can design rifling differently in that the twist that they may put into the barrel could twist to the left, or it may twist to the right, the spin to the left, spin to the right. The number of lands and grooves designed.
There, when you say lands and grooves, you have to tell us what that means.
Sure. That's just the raised and lowered portions in the barrel that actually create the rifling. So you want to have a different depth to those pieces so that it will bite into the bullet and force the spin on it. And manufacturers can choose to vary in the number of lands and grooves that they use, and the actual width or the dimensions of those can vary.
And based on the number of lands and grooves and the right or left twist, are you able to eliminate or include certain firearms as firing that particular bullet?
Yes,
And did we ask you to do that in this case as well?
yes,
And in doing that, did you determine that both a CZ and a Ruger could fire, could have the same characteristics, lands and grooves, right or left twist, as the bullets that were removed from Becky's body and that were found at the scene?
those were manufacturers that were included in the list when I entered all of the information regarding the rifling and the measurements, yes.
And to be fair, there were other firearms that would also have those same characteristics.
Yes,
But two of them were a CZ and a Luger.
yes,
You were also given a Ruger from the defendant's house to test fire and compare, is that right?
I was given a firearm, yes.
And did you do that testing?
I did,
When we say that, is it fair to say you basically fire that firearm, collect the bullet, collect the shell casing, and compare it just like you have here with your example?
yes,
The firearm that was found in the defendant's house was excluded from shooting the bullet or the shell casings that were recovered at the scene, is that right?
the firearm I examined was not the firearm used for the, for an identification, yes, correct.
Now, you were also given 54 shell casings that were recovered in the defendant's basement,
I did have additional cartridge cases, yes,
and there were 54, is that right?
yes,
27 of them you were able to come up with a match, is that fair to say?
yes, I did,
Let's talk about those 27 shell casings. You compared those 27 shell casings to each other.
correct,
So you compared the 27 as a group, just like you have here with the comparison microscope and the hairline, looking for those specific fingerprints from a gun, right?
correct.
What did you find as it relates to those 27 shell casings that were found in the defendant's basement?
I determined that the 27 cartridge cases were identified as being fired by the same firearm,
So those 27 shell casings that you recovered were all fired by the same
by a
firearm.
single firearm, yes,
By one firearm, those 27 all fired by one single intact firearm.
correct.
Did you compare those 27 shell casings that we just talked about that were recovered in the defendant's basement on March 1st, 2023, to the 8 shell casings that were found around the body of Becky Bliefnick on February 23rd, 2023?
I did a comparison of those, yes.
Next slide. And here are we looking at one of the photographs from that comparison.
Yes,
So we have item 1 on the left, that's one of the 8 shell casings that were found around Becky's body.
that's correct,
And item 32-1 on the right, that was one of the shell casings that was found in the defendant's basement, correct?
that was a part of the 54 cartridge cases, yes.
And again, magnification 40 times, index black dot at 6 o'clock, you've explained to us that's just so you can orientate those shell casings to the same position.
Correct.
And again, did you move that hairline across the face of the shell casing?
The two items, yes,
We could have 189. And again, that just shows that hairline moved to a different location.
correct.
And after examining the 27 shell casings and the 8 shell casings and comparing them together, using your 26 years of experience and the testing and training that you received in those 26 years where you passed every time with a score of 100%, what can you tell us about the 27 shell casings found in the defendant's basement and the 8 shell casings found around Becky's body?
The findings are that I determined the 8 cartridge cases in items 1 through 8, and then 27 of those 54 cartridge cases were identified as being fired by the same single firearm.
One firearm fired the 27 shell casings in the basement and the 8 around Becky's body.
Correct.
The same firearm fired all those shell casings.
That was my findings.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Crossman Schnuck.
Yes, thank you. Ma'am, I have some questions for you this morning, okay?
Sure.
Bear with me. If you don't understand my question, just let me know. I ask bad questions a lot, so let's get into it. So in your particular line of work, when you're comparing projectiles or shell casings, you use a really sophisticated microscope, correct?
Yes,
And your findings are not based on something that a computer program told us or that a specific algorithm told you, correct?
that's correct.
This is based off of what you see under your microscope, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
And
so-
based on my training and experience.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So in an area, in a field like yours, where there's human interpretation, it's also subject to human error. Is that a fair statement?
It is a subjective, opinion-based science.
So two people can look at under the same microscope and have two differing opinions. Is that fair?
Someone could have a different opinion.
All right, so, and in your testimony with Mr. Jones, when you are doing these comparisons, I believe that you said that you look for similarities because there is no exact reproduction when a bullet is fired out of a gun. Is that fair?
Yes.
So you look for similarities and you look for consistencies,
You're
correct?
looking for that overall pattern to reproduce. It's not a line counting situation. It's not that we have a number of points that we have to look for an identification. There's no minimum amount required. It is truly just the pattern of the spatial relationship of those elements, the depth, the width, the height, that we're looking at, realizing that these are three-dimensional objects that we're looking at.
And when you did your specific comparisons in this case, you compared the 8 shell casings that were found at the crime scene against each other, correct?
Yes,
So you compared 1 to 2 and 1 to 3 and 1 to 4 and so on and so forth?
it can vary. Typically, we have a standard, and I might have that either item 1 or item 2 was used as a standard. Sometimes I will use a couple. So it's not that every time I'm going to use the same one because, again, what it is looking for that reproduction between those two items.
So in this case, and I'm looking at agency items 3 through 10, which would be lab items 1 through 8, which would be the 9mm Luger fired cartridge cases, okay?
Yes.
Were all 8 of those compared against each other individually?
Yes.
Okay, and then were each of those 8 cartridge cases compared against all of the cartridge cases that were submitted to you from Tim's house individually?
No.
Okay, so did you take specific cartridge cases from items 1 through 8 and then compare them to random items with respect to items 32-1 through 32-54?
Yes, because as it was explained before, I looked at 1 through 8 to each other, determined they were fired by the same firearm. So now at this point, I have a single source among those 8. Then of the others, in the 27 that were identified to the same source, at that point then, all I need to do is take one from the one group and compare it to one from the other because the findings of those two groups independently had already been determined.
So is it entirely possible that there would be similarities in item 6 that may not be found in item 3210?
I don't know that I understand your question.
Sure, so you did not compare all 8 casings to all 27 casings, correct? Once you determined that those 8 casings were a match, then you took one of those items and compared it against the 27, correct?
Correct.
And you did not take all 8 of those casings and compare each of those 8 casings to each of the 27 casings, correct?
Yeah, there was not a need to.
Okay. Is it possible that one of those items, 1 through 8, could have different similarities as a casing in items 1 through 27?
I don't know that, to me, different and similarities make sense together.
Okay. You stated earlier that you look for similarities and patterns, correct?
Yes, I'm looking for a pattern reproduction.
Okay, so you don't know if there is a difference in item 1 through 8 that may not have been identified in 1 through 27 because they were not all compared to each other.
But they were all identified to the same source.
I understand that, but 1 through 8 were not compared, again, all of them were not compared against 1 through 27, fair?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
Okay. And when Mr. Jones was asking you about the type of gun that these could have been fired from, he asked you about a Luger and a CZ, but there were also several other types of firearms that could be included as firing this type, or making these types of marks, correct?
Having the same class characteristics.
You know, it could be a Browning, it
Yes,
could be a Beretta,
yes,
any other type of gun with similar rifling characteristics, correct?
correct.
But you were not provided a weapon in this matter that you could say fired any of these bullets or shell casings, correct?
I did not make any identifications to the firearm that was provided.
Okay, and the only thing that you could tell us is potentially what type of firearm fired these, but not which exact gun, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and you certainly can't tell us that the gun you were given was the one that shot these bullets and shell casings, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and when you're doing the land and groove comparisons, do you need to have the weapon that fired those in order to confirm the comparisons with respect to the projectiles?
No.
And is that the same with respect to the casings?
Yes.
And would the casings and the projectiles have the same types of markings, or would they be different?
Meaning in just how a bullet marks in a cartridge case, or between the two items?
Correct.
They will mark different because a bullet is actually traveling down the barrel, picking up marks as it moves from one end down to the muzzle end, where the cartridge case itself, is picking up an impressed mark. So when the bullet travels down the barrel, it's kind of the equal and opposite action reaction thing. The force that pushes the bullet down the barrel is also going to push the cartridge case rearward into the breech area of the firearm. So these marks are just going to get an impressed mark on them, an impressed fingerprint, as the state's attorney is using. So it's not going to be a striated mark as it travels from one end to the other. So they have different types of marks.
Okay, and so you look at a projectile differently than the way that you would look at a casing?
I look at it the same, doing a side-by-side comparison. It's just a different type of mark. It's a striation versus an impressed mark.
So what you're looking for is different, in a sense.
I'm still looking for a
You're
reproduction.
looking for a reproduction, but there wouldn't be an exact reproduction.
Correct.
Okay, and when you're looking for these reproductions and you're looking for these patterns, this is something that you're looking for and not a program or an algorithm?
That's correct.
Okay. No other questions, Judge?
Redirect.
Just a couple questions. Ma'am, after you do the testing and issue your opinion, there's a peer review process, correct?
Yes,
So your findings have to be confirmed by other people in the lab.
that's correct. Any identification that is, before an identification can be reported out, it has to be confirmed by another examiner.
And that was done in this case.
Yes,
Your identification that these groups of shell casings were fired by the exact same gun was confirmed by another examiner.
that was their opinion also, yes.
And in 26 years of testing, you've gotten everything right every time in those 26 years of testing, correct?
Objection.
That's what she testified to.
That'll
On the
be
proficiency
That's what I'm
tests,
saying. Now, on the proficiency test, you got 100% every time for 26 years.
yes.
That's all the questions I have.
Ms. Stock?
No other questions, Judge?
All right, you may step down.
Okay.
And she's free to go.
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel, step up. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we still have more evidence to present, but because of the length of the next witness, then we are going to take lunch now. And what I'd ask is you'll have till 12:45 for your lunch, and then we will try and start at 12:45, all right? So we will be adjourned.
All right.
All right, counsel, just for planning purposes, Mr. Jones, you have at least one other witness today?
Just one other witness, and at that point, we would rest, Your Honor.
Okay, and if we get done with him, we'll have things to discuss outside the presence of the jury. So once you rest, then I will release the jury for the day. And then are you going to need some time before we argue or meet, or what do you think, Ms. Schnock? Are you going to want a couple minutes after, or a little bit after they rest?
Maybe 10 minutes,
Oh, okay, just
not much.
Just a little
Yeah.
time, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't we do that then? We told the jury 12:45, so let's be back here ready to go by then. We'll do the state's witness, then the state will rest. I will dismiss the jury for the day, and then we can, then we'll take a short break, and then we can argue the upcoming motion, and then I will then go into, for the first time, whether or not the defendant's going to testify. Do you want to kind of look at jury instructions then this afternoon?
Yeah.
We could do
Yeah,
that, Your Honor.
I don't think jury instructions are going to take much time in this, Your
Okay.
Honor. Based on the preliminary instructions I've been given and the evidence that has come out so far, I don't anticipate many changes at all.
Okay. All right, then let's do that. Then we will break for lunch. We'll be in recess.
All right.